Week 31, Day 1. Heresy. Unbelief, dissent, lack of faith.
He accused the leader of the opposition of political heresy, and the mob was exhorted to burn his effigy.
Prudent. Wise, cautious.
In the bedlam that followed, it was not prudent to appear too apathetic.
Ostensible. Outward, pretended, seeming.
While the ostensible enemy was the opposition leader, the main purpose of this rash behavior was the eradication of all opponents.
Fervid. Intense, enthusiastic, passionate.
His fervid appeal for action threw his adherents into a frenzy.
Spurious. False, counterfeit, specious.
In the conflagration that followed, no one questioned whether the original charge had been spurious.
Cold shoulder. To disregard or ignore.
She was so piqued at his uncouth behavior, she gave him the cold shoulder for over a week.
Choose sagely. Today, the paramount influence in the forming of public opinion is propaganda. It is not a heresy to our democratic beliefs to state that pressure groups play an important part in our lives. Propaganda makes one vulnerable to the influences of others. The prudent person will choose between cogent and specious propaganda efforts. While propaganda has the ostensible purpose of informing the public, the most fervid propagandists use methods that must be examined by the thoughtful citizen. The ability to distinguish the spurious from the true facts requires more than a perfunctory examination of prevalent propaganda efforts.
Week 31, Day 2. Propagate. Produce, multiply, spread.
I must inveigh against your attempt to propagate the belief that your political system will result in a panacea for all problems.
Anomaly. Irregularity, abnormality.
Siamese twins are considered a birth anomaly.
Innocuous. Harmless, mild, innocent.
There appears to be no such thing as an innocuous heresy.
Surfeit. Excess, superabundance.
When can we expect a respite from the surfeit of TV commercials?
Milieu. Environment, setting.
It is incongruous to find an abstemious person in a milieu of avarice and affluence.
Without rhyme or reason. Making no sense.
Without rhyme or reason, the pennant-winning baseball team decided to jettison its manager.
A free society. In a free society, it is intrinsic that individuals and groups have the inherent right to propagate ideas and try to win converts. We do not look upon an idea different from ours as an anomaly that should be precluded. Nor do we permit only innocuous or congenial beliefs and forbid those that we believe are dubious or spurious. In a country of competing pressures, we are accosted by a surfeit of propaganda that tends to overwhelm us. Thus, we live in a milieu of ubiquitous bombardment from countless, and often unrecognized, propagandists.
Week 31, Day 3. Strident. Shrill, harsh, rough.
Her strident voice added to the bedlam.
Concomitant. Accompanying, attending.
There are many concomitant dangers to obesity.
Lassitude. Weariness, fatigue.
After the frenzy that accompanied the burning of the effigy, they were all acutely aware of a feeling of lassitude.
Deleterious. Bad, harmful.
The gist of the report was that smoking will have a deleterious effect on health.
Efficacy. Power to produce an effect.
The efficacy of new drugs cannot be determined without a plethora of evidence.
Swan song. Final or last.
The ex-champion said that if he lost this fight it would be his swan song.
Who listens? As the quantity of propaganda becomes greater, ideas are presented in more strident tones, in order to overcome the increased competition. Those who are the targets of the propaganda find it more difficult to discern between or analyze the new and expanded pressures. The concomitant situation that develops with the stepped-up propaganda is one in which the individual retreats into a state of lassitude. He has an aversion to all attempts to influence him. So we can see the intrinsic weakness inherent in an increased level of propaganda. It has the deleterious result of reducing its efficacy upon the individuals or groups who were its objective.
Week 31, Day 4. Dissent. Differ, disagree, protest.
The gist of his ominous suggestion was that we dissent from the majority opinion.
Ferment. Uproar, agitation, turmoil.
With each generation it becomes the vogue for the youth to be in a state of ferment.
Attenuated. Weakened, thinned, decreased.
The strength of her appeal was attenuated by the flamboyant embellishments for which many had a strong aversion.
Arbiter. Judge.
The Supreme Court is our ultimate arbiter of legality.
Incumbent. Morally required.
It is incumbent on us to be zealous in combating the deleterious effects of drugs.
To get the sack. To be discharged or fired.
Despite the fact that he was so obsequious toward the boss, he got the sack because he was lethargic about doing his job.
The people decide. The place of propaganda in a milieu that is not free differs from its place in an open society. In a dictatorship there is no competing propaganda. Those who dissent from the official line may do so only in a clandestine manner. Where there is no open ferment of ideas, the possibility of discerning the true from the spurious is attenuated. In a democracy, the inevitable arbiter of what propaganda is to be permitted is the people. It is incumbent upon each citizen to choose between competing propagandas, while remaining cognizant of the value for a democracy in the existence of all points of view.
Week 32, Day 1. Profound. Deep, intense.
It is easy to construe a superficial remark to be a profound one.
Alleviate. Make easier, lighten.
If we cannot alleviate the harmful effects entirely, at least we can attenuate them.
Prodigious. Extraordinary, enormous.
The enemy made a prodigious effort to repress the uprising.
Expedite. Carry out promptly.
We hoped that the arbiter would expedite the solution to the fracas that had been so elusive for a long time.
Celerity. Speed, rapidity.
He accepted the lucrative position with celerity.
Ivory tower. Isolated from life, not in touch with life's problems.
Many artists have been said to be living in an ivory tower.
Anyone for Google? As automation permeates many new areas of life, its effect upon us becomes concomitantly more profound. Information processing, blogs, search engines of all types have found their ways into businesses, as well as our homes, schools, and libraries. Here they alleviate the burden of storing and providing us with an accumulation of information that is becoming more prodigious in this era of specialization and threatening to inundate our society.
Week 32, Day 2. Usurp. Seize, annex, grab.
It is during a period of ferment that a dictator can usurp power.
Paltry. Of little importance, insignificant.
They exacerbated a paltry difference of opinion into a prodigious conflict.
Condone. Excuse, pardon.
Do you expect me to condone that reprehensible act with such celerity?
Trivial. Petty, worthless.
The most trivial defects may have a deleterious effect upon the efficacy of that new process.
Bizarre. Fantastic, odd.
Most of us scoff at and belittle bizarre behavior.
To feather one's nest. To enrich oneself on the sly or at every opportunity.
He played up to his senile aunt, in the hope of feathering his nest, when she made out her will.
Everyone is talking. Can anyone under the age of 20 remember a time when the dial telephone was the only method of voice communication over long distances? What a bizarre concept this must seem for today's youth. It has become an antiquated cultural form of personal contact. The instrument for the modern communicator is the cell phone, which has usurped the wire-connected stationary model. With cell phone companies competing for customers, they issue offering a paltry number of minutes of talking time. The cell phone user can take advantage of a plethora of special deals and carry on with significant or trivial conversations for seemingly endless time and in almost any location. Often, these personal talks are held in the most public places, and those within hearing find it difficult to condone the inconvenience caused by the indiscriminate use of this ubiquitous instrument.
Week 32, Day 3. Menial. Humble, degrading.
Although she did not find it congenial, we cajoled our daughter into doing some of the menial tasks around the house.
Venerable. Respected, worshipped.
The prodigy revered the venerable master.
Extraneous. Foreign, not belonging.
The astute voter is not susceptible to the many extraneous shibboleths that saturate a politician's speech.
Ambiguous. Vague, undefined, not specific.
To those who could understand every nuance of the cryptic message, there was nothing ambiguous about it.
Succinct. Brief, concise.
He could say the most vitriolic things in a succinct way.
The writing on the wall. An incident or event that shows what will happen in the future.
In retrospect, he should have seen the writing on the wall, when his girlfriend gave him only a cursory greeting, on his birthday.
The future is here. We have ardently taken to the cell phone as a replacement for the venerable dial-up model. The most striking feature of the cell phone is the variety of uses to which it can be put. The dial-up phone is restricted to the menial task of mere conversation. For the garrulous person who isn't restricted to one place, the mobile cell phone has a myriad of uses. Should one be in an area that requires silence, there is an ability to utilize the succinct text messaging feature. Should one come upon an ambiguous event that one wishes to keep, one may photograph it or make it into a film for further study. Do not preclude from the list of uses the access to your computer, music, and weather reports. One can hardly imagine an extraneous technical marvel that will not embellish the cell phone in the future.
Week 32, Day 4. Archaic. Out of date.
With all candor, I cannot wish for a return to the archaic times, when a moribund society provided an opulent existence for some, but a loathsome life for the majority.
Emulate. Rival, strive to equal.
The wish to emulate a great person is laudable.
Facetious. Comical, humorous, witty.
There is something facetious about an egotist, who has the temerity to begin a speech with, in all humility.
Rabid. Fanatical, furious, mad.
It is not prudent to malign or castigate, or be derogatory in any way toward a rabid political adherent.
Salubrious. Healthful, wholesome.
Some maintain that the ascetic leads a salubrious life.
On the bandwagon. Joining with the majority, going along with the trend.
Most advertisements, showing many people using a product, hope to convince the viewer to get on the bandwagon and buy the item.
It's happening now. The flood of new technology makes each modern marvel appear archaic within the briefest time period. An assiduous examination of today's communication methods will make clear how quickly a rabid purchaser of the newest product will want to emulate friends and buy the next one. The cell phone that can track down the location of a user, or the music downloading pod that has a potential to record almost countless songs, are being replaced with more powerful and exciting products. It would not be facetious to claim that scientists will persevere in devising ways for us to contact each other by voice, photographs, and print messages that give us access to a more salubrious social network.
Week 33, Day 1. Complacent. Self-satisfied.
The guard was so complacent about the danger of escape that he gave the prisoner only a cursory inspection.
Somber. Gloomy, sad.
The deleterious results of his irate outburst put the previously jocose audience in a somber mood.
Debilitate. Weaken.
We should be prudent in our play or work during very hot weather, because the sun has the power to enervate and debilitate those that scoff at its effects.
Impetuous. Impulsive.
They were so moved by the idyllic setting, they exchanged surreptitious, impetuous kisses.
Occult. Secret, mysterious, supernatural.
He looked for a propitious moment to exhibit his occult abilities.
To hit the nail on the head. To state or guess something correctly.
When Charlie said there were 3,627 beans in that jar, he hit the nail on the head.
At a loss. With the trivial sum of $5 in his pockets, Robert Lacey was feeling far from complacent about the future. In fact, it was his somber estimate that no matter how frugal he was, his money would run out before the next day. He owed $3.50 in debts to friends, with the remainder he would have to eat enough to maintain his strength. Hunger would debilitate him to the point where he could not continue his fervid search for Evelyn. There was no hope of an impetuous stranger suddenly thrusting money upon him. There was still less solace for him in the hope that, after all this time, he might develop the occult power that would give him a mental image of where Evelyn could be found.
Week 33, Day 2. Discreet. Careful, cautious, prudent.
Despite the plethora of offers to write her life story, the recently divorced movie queen kept a discreet silence.
Foment. Stir up, instigate.
In order to foment trouble, they fabricated a deplorable and blatant untruth.
Glean. Gather, collect.
The reporters could not glean anything from her servants.
Quarry. Something hunted or pursued.
Although it seemed inane, they sought their quarry in the midst of rustic surroundings that were not its natural habitat.
Slovenly. Disorderly, carelessly.
She loathed doing menial tasks, and she did them in a slovenly manner.
On the dot. Exactly on time.
Despite his having taken 40 winks, he got to his appointment on the dot.
Making plans. Robert had arrived in New York a week earlier. He had begun by asking discreet questions of Evelyn's former landlord. There was no need to foment opposition at the very beginning. The landlord was recondite, and all Robert had been able to glean from the cryptic replies was that Evelyn had moved to a residence that catered to single women. Robert was in a hapless situation. In this immense city his quarry could be hiding in one of dozens of such places. This would obviate the possibility of his dashing from one place to another in an impetuous manner. His search, while it had to be concluded with celerity, could not be carried out in such slovenly fashion. He required a succinct and meticulous plan.
Week 33, Day 3. Abjure. Renounce, abstain from.
In vain, the entire family tried to importune him to abjure gambling.
Reproach. Rebuke, reprimand.
You should not condone his sordid behavior, rather, reproach him for his fractious manner.
Penitent. Regretful, confessing guilt.
The inveterate gambler became penitent and contrite when faced with the results of his reprehensible behavior.
Evanescent. Fleeting, passing, momentary.
The optimist knows that the vicissitudes of life are evanescent, and she always looks on the sanguine side of things.
Tantamount. Equivalent, identical.
At the zenith of his career, he was tantamount to a final arbiter on matters of economic policy.
To take under one's wing. To become responsible for.
As the new term began, the senior took the freshman under her wing.
A newspaper ad. On the premise that Evelyn knew she was being sought, Robert's first step was to abjure fruitless searching and place an ad in the leading morning newspaper. He would importune in a most careful way for her return. The ad read, "Evelyn, come out of hiding. I do not reproach you for your actions. I expect no penitent confession. There is nothing ambiguous about my offer. Please contact Robert." He added a box number for a reply. When Robert went to the paper the next morning, he felt sanguine about the chances of locating her. His evanescent concerns disappeared. There was a letter for him, and with tremulous fingers he tore it open. It contained one sentence, and it was tantamount to a challenge. "If you really care about me, you will find me by midnight, Friday, Evelyn."
Week 33, Day 4. Propensity. Disposition, inclination, bent.
Some girls have a propensity for swarthy men who wear gaudy clothes.
Wary. Watchful, shrewd.
Her father warned her to be wary of adding the encumbrance of a steady boyfriend, as this would attenuate her chances of finishing college.
Allay. Calm, soothe.
It is difficult to allay the concern of parents about how susceptible their children are and how easily they succumb to drugs.
Deter. Hinder, discourage.
This did not deter her from getting into a deplorable situation, due to her rash and perverse actions.
Connoisseur. Expert.
The connoisseur scoffs at the dilettante, who has only a veneer of knowledge.
Out of one's depth. In a situation that is too difficult to handle.
We thought he knew the ropes, but we found him behind the 8 ball, because he was out of his depth.
At the ballet. Evelyn was an anomaly. She had a propensity for folk music and rock and roll dancing, and, at the same time, she was an avid fan of classical ballet. At one time she had been a fledgling ballet dancer. Robert headed for a theater, where a venerable ballet company was performing. He knew he had to be wary so that Evelyn might not see him first. It was Tuesday evening, 2 days gone with so little to show. Only 3 more remaining before the deadline set by Evelyn. He tried hard to allay the sudden fear that came over him that he might not locate her. Nothing would deter him from succeeding. And so, although he was far from a connoisseur of the dance, he was standing among the throng in the lobby, hoping it would be a propitious evening for him.
Week 34, Day 1.